Online meetings can be a challenge, but they don't have to be a chore. Hi, I'm Professor Seth C. Oranburg, and I'm here to help you successfully host and attend online meetings. I teach at Duquesne University School of Law, where my courses include contracts, corporations, and venture capital law. I have a JD from the University of Chicago, and I'm certified in online teaching. And today I'm really excited to bring what I've learned from the classroom to help you out in your workplace in this new normal. Today's goal is to help you use Zoom and WebEx like a pro. We're going to cover some of the most interesting and useful tools in two of the largest video conferencing platforms in use today. And moreover, we're going to understand how these tools can be deployed strategically to achieve deliberate objectives and purposes of meetings. We're going to cover how to successfully host online meetings through a straightforward three-step process. Step 1, consider the purpose of having the meeting. Step 2, set an agenda and circulate it in advance. And step 3, use the right tools on your video conference platform so that you end up having an effective, productive meeting. Attending online meetings is similar. Although you're not drafting the agenda if you're an attendee, you should review it carefully to understand what is the purpose, and moreover, what is my role in achieving the goals and purpose of this meeting. Then you can also select the right tools for the job. There are a lot of promises with online meetings. They can be more focused, you can be more comfortable in your home, you don't have to travel, and they're more efficient because you don't have to worry about parking and finding the right room. But is that really how things work out? Or are online meetings fraught with, you're on mute, I can't hear you, the camera's glitchy, I can't see what you're sharing on your screen, and moreover, I can't sense the reactions and emotions of those people around me, so I'm not building rapport with my team? Well, I'm here to tell you that these complaints can be addressed and even turned around and made into positives. Let's start with step 1. Consider the purpose of the meeting. As Tony Robbins said, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. Why does purpose matter? People need to feel a purpose. They want to feel inspired. Establishing goals and recognizing accomplishments inspires people to attend and participate in meetings. We shouldn't have them for no reason, and we should express the reasons we're having them, because all of our team members' time is valuable, especially now that so many of us have additional obligations with childcare and family. So let's think about the purpose that meetings can perform and make sure we express that so that our attendees know their time is valued. I'm going to briefly talk about theory behind meetings, so please bear with me for a few minutes. I hope you'll find that this is very useful when it comes time to selecting your tools. Effectively, meetings can perform certain functions, and there are certain functions that we can design a meeting to accomplish. I have identified 4 functions or goals or purposes that meetings can achieve online. Meetings online can inform people, can create group goals, can execute on those goals, and can adapt the organization for changing circumstances. Let's briefly talk about those 4 goals one by one, because later we'll see how we can select tools that meet the needs of achieving those goals. If the goal of your meeting is to simply inform your audience of straightforward facts, the first question is, do you really need a meeting at all? Meetings are not the most efficient way to deliver purely factual information. Consider writing an email or recording a video and allowing people to watch it on their own time if you simply need to inform them of something important. However, some information needs to be conveyed by a particular speaker, and by featuring a person who is very visible through, for example, the tool of speaker view, you can convey emotional information and credibility along with the facts. If you're conveying very complex information, you may want to use voiceover slides so that you can show a diagram or illustration, or use the screen share tool in order to show as well as telling the information that you're trying to convey. Meetings can be used to create collective goals, goals that the entire group or organization have bought into and agree on. But providing an environment to establish collective goals is a very different virtual space than merely informing people. As a result, we want to use different tools. If you're trying to create collective goals, and answer the question, what shall we do as a group or team or organization? We're going to want to use gallery views so that more people are seen and more people feel that they are on equal footing and can participate in that goal setting process. We can use the chat function for people who are quieter to express themselves in writing or directly, privately to the host who might share their viewpoints. Or we can use the raise hand function if we have a large group and effectively call on people to participate so that everyone has a chance to express their opinion during the goal setting process. Meetings are also a place where the group does real work or executes on the goals that they have already established. They might also plan how to execute goals. So, execute is the how shall we do it function, where we formalize processes or perform tasks. Once again, if we have this goal for the meeting, we're going to choose a different set of tools. Using document share can be a great way for the entire group to work on a draft document at the same time. And if you're sharing the document, it may be unnecessary to have any other visual information. In fact, the members may be able to concentrate more on the document if you use audio only and don't have videos at the same time as sharing the document. One of the other executive functions is to make a decision and take a vote, and the polling feature is very useful for this. It can be done anonymously, and so, unlike a meeting where everyone raises their hands, you can actually have private voting much more easily online. Sometimes organizations are forced to adapt and adapt quickly. In fact, that's happening right now because COVID is changing the way we do business and do business online. So sometimes you have to call a meeting to talk about this adaptive process. These meetings are delicate because we are overturning an established order and asking people to change their work paradigms in dramatic ways. We now need to use some of the best tools in our toolbox in order to achieve consensus so that we can efficiently change entire corporate processes. Tools including gallery view are useful, but here we actually might want to make that even more personal with breakout rooms, which can put the participants in smaller groups so they can see and be heard more easily. The chat function here might again be employed, but we might open it up and permit people to chat to everyone. Again, if we feel strongly that people need to express themselves, we need to give them a virtual environment to do that in so that we have buy in for our most fundamental changes. As Francis Bacon said, councils to which time hath not been called, time will not ratify. We need to give people an opportunity to be heard before making fundamental changes, and we need to be strategic about our use of tools to do this effectively online. The agenda communicates the goals of the meeting and helps the attendees plan to succeed in it. The agenda, which is circulated before the meeting, is by far the most important preliminary piece of information that is sent around. If it's written properly, it has the power of speeding up and clarifying the meeting so that everyone is on the same page, literally on that page on which the agenda is printed. The main problem people have with agendas is they want to keep them short because people are terrified of long meetings. But you need to have an agenda that describes the meeting you're actually going to have. And it should evidence that you have planned. Because, as Benjamin Franklin said, by failing to plan, you are planning to fail. Let's talk about planning for success. I have 4 tips on how to write an effective agenda. The first is indicate the start and end time and stick to it. There is only one way to ensure that your meeting starts on time. You need to start it on time. Latecomers who find the meeting began without them will learn that lesson. And if you start the meeting late as stragglers come in, well, they're going to learn that lesson too, which can hurt punctuality at future meetings and make others feel that their time is not valued. So, give a start and end time and stick to it. Second, write specific items. Although this may make the agenda longer, it'll make it useful. Compare writing development budget as an agenda item to discussion, proposal for reduction of the academic year 2020 to 2021 development budget due to social distancing regulations. Compare whether the first or the second gives you enough information to be prepared for that conversation. The moral here is don't be afraid of a long agenda. Be afraid of long meetings. Think about what you can actually accomplish in an hour, and two at most. Almost no one is able to be productive in a meeting longer than 2 hours. And again, 1 hour or even a half hour is ideal for many topics that can be addressed discreetly. Next, provide a heading for each item. I'll talk about this on the next slide, but these headings are going to clue our attendees in to the goals of that particular item on the agenda, so they know how to dialogue and interact with it, and this will also help you in your thought process as the host as to which tools you want to employ. And last but certainly not least, circulate the agenda about and maybe at least 48 hours in advance of the meeting. The attendees need time to process that information, think about what they're going to say, and do some preliminary research so that they come to that meeting prepared to be effective and impactful. If you follow these tips, you'll have an effective agenda that will be a great foundation for a productive meeting. I recommend using headings to communicate goals. So each agenda item should have some type of heading explaining what is going to be done at that time. And you can use words that relate to the goals that you mean to achieve. For example, using the term report suggests that that particular agenda item is about information and that the attendees should expect to receive information and be prepared to digest it. That's helpful because they'll come into it with a mindset of, let me listen. On the other hand, if the agenda item says discuss, that implies that the attendees should take an active role in sharing new ideas. So they might come prepared with some ideas that they want to present or some thoughts about how they want to shape the direction of that conversation. Once you've established the agenda that you want to accomplish, it's time to think about the tools that will actually get the job done. Now we're going to get a little bit more practical and talk about the tools you have at your disposal when you teach online and how to use them. As Arthur Miller said, man must shape his tools, lest they shape him. Simply because you have the ability to run a web conference doesn't mean you should. And moreover, you should be aware of all the tools in your toolkit so that you can pull out the right one when the time is needed. Do you really need a meeting? Before you schedule a meeting, consider asynchronous alternatives that people can do on their own time. For example, instead of calling an all-hands meeting, consider recording a video and broadcasting that to your audience so they can watch it on their own time. They may be more attentive and more receptive if they can watch it at a time that's more convenient for them. In addition, writing is a very effective way to communicate information, sometimes more effective than video, especially if you want that information to be referred back to in the future. Writing, such as an email or a memo, provides a document and something tangible and permanent so that people can identify that information later very easily. And even some conversations can happen offline. Products like Slack and other workplace communication tools allow discussions to happen like a chat room, but it doesn't have to be tied to a specific time and place. Again, meetings are extremely effective at accomplishing their goals and purposes, but if you don't need a meeting to accomplish the purpose of your particular task, consider alternatives. We have many new tools at our disposal for online meetings, and we're now able to make some discrete choices about the tools that we use, such that we can accomplish very discrete objectives online. In an in-person meeting, a lot of things happen organically, but the big lesson about moving online is you have to be very strategic and deliberate. You have to use the tools that fit the job. We've already, through our agenda process, thought critically about the goals and the job itself, and now we're going to talk in more detail about the individual tools we can use to get that work done. There are 4 categories of goals that online meetings can accomplish well, and there are some tools that tend to lend themselves to achieving those objectives. Remember, you don't always need to hold a meeting, especially when you're conveying pure information. But there are some types of information that need to be conveyed in a human way. In those cases, we want to use speaker view to highlight the person who is sharing that information. And we're able then to bring the emotional information along with the factual information so that the message is properly conveyed. The messenger is part of the message, and as my mentor once said, in addition to the words, there's also the music. If it's the type of thing where the music and the person is important, speaker view is a great way to inform people of those intangibles. In addition, if you have very complicated factual information that may have specific facts or figures that need some explanation and may result in questions, those are great things to put up on the screen while having an audio-only conversation about them. In this way, the audience has a chance to process the information and ask their questions in real time, and some of those questions will relate to other attendees, and we'll be able to get everyone on the same page relatively quickly. The creative process, at least with regard to a group goal creation, almost always requires a meeting because we want to give people a chance to share their views. There are some ways to accomplish this asynchronously, but by using gallery view, where everyone is on equal footing, the same size box on the screen, we can give people a chance to share their opinions. Now, if we have a large group, this can get difficult. In fact, if you have more than 49 people in your group, Zoom can't even display all of those faces. However, a host who is wise about the choices he or she is making and informed about the tools can use things like chat to bring in information and share it to the group, or raise hands to identify people and keep the conversation under control, while at the same time giving everyone a chance to share their views. Planning and executing can also be very productive online, but actually getting work done sometimes means turning the camera off. If you are dealing with pure work that doesn't have a lot of emotional component to it, the webcam can actually be a distracting source of extraneous information. Instead of having a video, consider putting the document on the screen and working on a shared version of it using software that everyone can edit a document at the same time. You can also use polling software in order to collect a vote, and you can even do that anonymously in a way that you couldn't in a room with everyone. Anonymous voting can get people's true opinions in a way that putting your hand up in a room full of your peers might not. So there is some power to doing some of these things online. If you're going to make a huge change and you need to announce it online, you can do this in a meeting, but I'd recommend using breakout rooms, which are a way to create smaller groups out of the larger group. That can help get the quiet people talking. And once again, we're going to use gallery view here because we're conveying emotional information. Now, these are guidelines, and so I want you to use this information to think about how you would use the tools that you need to accomplish your meeting goals. But in general, there are a couple different modes that we use depending on what we're trying to accomplish. In addition to the tools, we also need to think about the platform. There are many web conferencing platforms out there right now, but the leading two are Zoom and WebEx. In addition, there is GoToMeeting/GoToWebinar, Microsoft Teams, Google Hangouts, FaceTime, and a number of others that are trying to crack into this competitive ecosystem. Now, everyone's going to have their favorite preferences, just like some people are for Mac and some people are for PC. So with the caveat that I'm just sharing with you on this slide, my opinion, I think that we can select the tool for the job by selecting the right platform first. In terms of speaker view, WebEx has some real advantages because you can pin the speaker so that everyone sees that person. With Zoom, you need to get a special add-on called Zoom Rooms to accomplish this. So if you're trying to share emotional information or you're trying to highlight various speakers, WebEx has advantages over Zoom. However, those advantages are not so significant as to make a decision on that basis alone, because the person who is speaking will be highlighted if the user chooses to view it that way. However, the default view is called Gallery View, and Gallery View shows little thumbnails of everybody. So when you log on to Zoom, you see a little square representing every person. And Zoom handles this really nicely. And as I mentioned, it's the default view. The problem is Zoom only handles up to 49 faces. So I recommend using Zoom for the types of projects where you'd want gallery view, so long as you have less than 50 attendees. In fact, it works best with around 12. On the other hand, WebEx can handle many, many more so long as you have paid for the higher end package. Document share, meaning putting a document on the screen that everyone can edit at the same time in real time, is unique to WebEx. It's an excellent feature, and for some, it is the killer feature that makes WebEx the only product they can use. It is not available on Zoom. Breakout rooms are very easy to do on Zoom, and I think Zoom is the clear winner here because you can create them quite quickly as needed. With WebEx, it takes a little bit more planning and forethought. They're very robust on WebEx, and you can create many of them, but they're a rather advanced skill. I also find screen share is a bit better on Zoom, and I think it has higher definition video. It does produce HD webcam video, and I've generally found the video quality to be better on Zoom than WebEx on the same connection. In addition, Zoom supports dual monitors, so if you're presenting content like I do, PowerPoint slides or something to that effect, where you would use presenter view on one monitor and audience view on another, Zoom supports that very nicely and very smoothly. However, if you are just providing your voiceover slides, well, for one thing, you might just record voiceover slides using PowerPoint's record feature, like I'm doing right now. Or I'd recommend a product like GoToWebinar, which is going to be built for that type of presentation, where it's a pure delivery of information and mainly a one-way channel. Anyway, that's just my thoughts, and this is a quickly evolving market that is very competitive, so this may be out of date quite soon, but I hope this has given you some things to think about so you can decide which of these platforms is right for you as the circumstances and the technology change. The host makes most of the choices about the meeting style, format, and structure, but there are some tools at the attendee's disposal so that the attendee can set his or her screen or interact with the group on their terms. And so we're going to roll into this conversation a discussion about pinning, chatting, and the raising hands feature so that attendees can also have some control over the meeting and the environment that they find themselves in when they're in it. Both Zoom and WebEx allow participants to raise their hands to be identified, but WebEx does it a little bit better because it gives the host the ability to sort the participants list by hands raised. If you select this feature as the host, the people whose hands are raised will come to the top of the participant list, making it easier to identify and call on them. I recommend that all hosts mute their participants upon entry. And depending on the size of your meeting and who is attending, you may not allow them to unmute themselves. The reason for this is that being off mute can cause distractions, interference, and unnecessary noise. Depending on whether or not we're attempting to have a flat structure where everyone is equal, or there is maybe a first among equals who chairs this and organizes it, and we're all brainstorming, or whether the presenter is really the focus and everyone else is primarily listening, will help you determine whether or not to put everyone on mute. But I do recommend it at least when people enter the room, because a lot of people have distracting background noises, and we can get some very unpleasant echo effects that can really distract your meeting. So go ahead and set everyone to mute when they enter, and depending on who you're inviting to the meeting, consider not allowing them to unmute themselves. You as the host will have to do it, and they can ask you that over chat. By the way, if you do have the power to unmute yourself, I would recommend you stay on mute until you're ready to speak, and then you can hold down the space bar while you're speaking, kind of like a walkie-talkie, to unmute yourself only as needed. There are two main ways to see your colleagues in a Zoom or WebEx or other online meeting environment: gallery view and speaker view. Gallery view is the default on Zoom, and it makes it look a bit like Hollywood squares. You've got a bunch of faces, small, tiled on the screen, and whoever is speaking will get a green box drawn around them while they're speaking. Otherwise, you can feel free to look at whomever in the meeting you choose to, and that can be important because if you're speaking, you can see how people are reacting to you, or if someone else is speaking, you can see who is reacting to them. However, that means that all the faces are quite small, so you might instead choose a spotlight view or a pin, and I'll cover the difference in just one moment. A spotlight view is going to make one selected participant quite large, and if the host spotlights someone, that means that that is the person everyone sees for the entire meeting. There is a difference between spotlighting and pinning, and it's an important difference if you're the host. Everyone has the ability to pin someone, which means that you can choose any of the participants and make them the active large speaker on your screen. However, on WebEx and on Zoom Rooms, but not on the basic Zoom, the host has the ability to spotlight the active speaker. And by locking the video view for everyone, that means automatically everyone who's in attendance sees only that individual or sees that individual larger than everyone else. This can be very useful if you're trying to maintain attention on a particular speaker. And again, it is called Spotlight on Zoom, where the host determines who everyone will see. Whereas pinning is where each individual attendee decides who he or she is going to focus their video on. WebEx has an excellent document share feature that just doesn't exist on Zoom, although I'll mention a workaround in just a minute. WebEx allows you to share a file during a meeting, and so instead of seeing a person, you see the document or some other file like a PowerPoint. And this can be super useful for collectively editing a document. So something like a mission statement could be displayed while the group is talking about it. Again, that's only available in WebEx, but a workaround is using an additional software program during the meeting. It might be useful to simply have an audio-only meeting, and everyone can log in to Google Docs or use Microsoft Office with SharePoint to co-edit a document at the same time. Now, it won't be exactly synced up with the meeting, but given that the video and the speech are separated, this is usually not too much of a problem. It just requires people having two different applications open at once and having two different logins at once. And it also means that you lose the video feature. But like I mentioned earlier, if you're dealing with a document and working through some factual information, it may not be that helpful to see people's faces. It might actually be distracting. WebEx has the definite edge here, but if you're on Zoom, you can use workarounds to accomplish similar objectives. One way to do it on Zoom is you can share your screen with a whiteboard feature. And the way the whiteboard works is it gives a place where everyone can doodle or add text to a particular screen. This has existed in both Zoom and WebEx. Now, on WebEx, I really like the document share feature, but you can emulate something like it on Zoom by putting up a couple lines of text. It just won't be nearly as robust as working with a full document. You can also use the whiteboard to do handwriting or doodles or to spotlight certain things, and everyone has the ability to work on that whiteboard together. By the way, the host has the power to limit access to the whiteboard. So if you, as the host, want to be the only person who is, in fact, writing on the whiteboard, you have that capability. The thing most people would think of with screen share is a presentation, usually a PowerPoint presentation or Keynote, which is the Mac version. And Zoom really shines in sharing presentations. Zoom has dual monitor support, so you can run your presentation in what's called presenter view. This enables you to see your notes and your next slides, while your audience only sees your slides. In addition, when Zoom enters screen sharing mode, the attendees are automatically put in a full screen mode where the largest image on their screen is what you're sharing, usually that PowerPoint, and there'll be a small thumbnail of the active speaker. This makes it really easy to get your attendees looking at the right thing. I think Zoom gets the edge here because it makes it almost foolproof to share PowerPoint videos, especially if you have dual monitor support. Perhaps as a host, you also want your attendees to be able to share their screen. Or maybe you were invited to someone else's meeting to present some information. In either case, you might have to enable sharing for all participants. Most IT directors have set sharing to only host as a default to prevent what's called Zoom bombing, when people would randomly show up at the meeting and disrupt it by displaying irrelevant or irreverent information and visuals. But if you're confident about who's in your meeting, the host can change that setting to allow participants to share their screen. And you access that by hitting the arrow next to the share screen, and that will open the advanced, you can select the advanced sharing options, which will open the screen you see here, and you simply move the checkbox, the radio button, from only host to all participants. If you are an attendee who intends to share your screen at a meeting, I would recommend making it clear to the meeting organizer in advance that you'd like to do so. And I also recommend getting into the meeting with the organizer or the host 5 minutes early so that you can make sure that that setting is enabled and looks right. It can be kind of flustering if the screen share doesn't work when it's your turn to present. There's also a polling feature, and I find Zoom's polling interface is much simpler than WebEx. That said, they both have easy to use polling features. Effectively, the way a poll works is you're going to click the poll button on Zoom and hit add a question. And then you simply type in a question. You have a limited number of characters you can use and a limited number of answer choices you can give, but it's typically enough for the type of polls that you would issue. After that, you simply hit save and launch poll, and then your members have a chance to vote on how they feel about that particular question. You have the choice of making it anonymous or not, and that can be really helpful if it's a sensitive topic and you want people's real opinions. Again, I think the anonymity gives online meetings a leg up over in-person meetings, at least if you really want people to tell you what they think and not just appear to have consensus. By the way, there is a feature where you can vote yes or no in the participant pane. Just so you're aware, when you vote in that way, it's visible to everyone. And that creates a certain dynamic in which I believe people don't necessarily say what they mean, but rather might tend to go with the herd. I've often found that when people call for a vote using the yes or no, some of the more timid members of the attendee crowd will wait until some of the higher status members have cast their votes, and then will vote in the same manner. If that's your desired objective, that's fine, but it doesn't get necessarily people to express how they really feel. Of course, an anonymous poll where they don't see the results, they have no information until you reveal what the results of the poll were, and so a poll is a much better way to get people's true beliefs as to an issue. Breakout rooms are a straightforward concept that you know from in-person conventions. It's simply getting a room to talk about something specific to a smaller group. And Zoom has this capability, as does WebEx. However, Zoom makes it a bit easier. On Zoom, at any time, you can simply hit the Breakout Rooms button and create a couple rooms, one or more. And then you can assign people into those rooms, or they can be randomly assigned into it. And those rooms will exist either until you close them or for a preordained period of time that you set. You can do this on Zoom very, very quickly in a matter of seconds. So if there is a group that is having a sidebar conversation during the main meeting, you might suggest as the host, I see that there's an important sidebar between persons A and persons B. Let's set up a breakout room for you two to talk that issue out and then come back to the group with your consensus on that issue so that we can move forward. In addition, we can use breakout rooms for increasing engagement because we can put people in smaller groups where they may feel more comfortable speaking out. And if we have a very large group and we're trying to convey sensitive information, breakout rooms are great because everyone is going to have their ability to see people and have themselves seen through the images on the screen will be much larger of everyone, and we can fit we can fit everyone on the screen. The chat function is another useful tool that hosts can use. The chat function effectively works like any other chat room that you've been in, or like a group message. Although On Zoom, there's a nice tweak where you can choose who you send that message to, whether to everyone or to a specific person, and more importantly, the host can limit the use of the chat function. The ability to chat the host is almost essential. I have never found a situation where I needed to turn host-only chat off. The host could simply ignore the chat if he or she doesn't want to pay attention to it. However, I have been in meetings where the chat was open to everyone, and everyone had the capability of chatting publicly. This resulted from time to time in a derailment of the mainline conversation, and those sidebars online began to overwhelm and distract the conversation. I would recommend that in order to control the meeting, you set chat to host only, and inform the participants that if they'd like to speak, they can chat you, or as we'll talk about, raise their hand, and you will unmute them and give them the floor. If you choose to have chat open to everyone, publicly and privately, just know that you are running the risk that there may be a significant amount of back-channel conversation outside of your control or knowledge. So I don't recommend that for most situations. However, if your needs require people to have an active back channel, you can use this tool. By the way, if you don't have a back channel built in, of course, people could still, for example, text message each other with their cell phones behind the scenes, but it's simply less cumbersome to have it right through here, and you facilitate those back channels by enabling them with this feature. So again, with the chat function, I recommend sticking with host only, unless you have a need for otherwise. If a person wants to speak, they can raise their hand. And this applies now to participants and attendees as well. You open the Participants tab, and you will see that the window that appears, you will have a ellipsis. And if you click that, you will have a few different icons that you can select from, as well as the basic icons of raise hand, yes, no, and go slower or faster. When a attendee raises their hand or says yes, no, or go slower, go faster, hands up, down, coffee, etc., that appears in the participants window, and you can see a little icon there representing that. I found that the hand raise feature is only so-so if there is one host who is focused on speaking and addressing the group, because quite frankly, it's hard to think about what you are saying, to see all the faces, to read the chat as it's scrolling by, and to look out for hands going up, and moreover to recognize the order in which they went up. I do use this for some of my classrooms, but typically the smaller ones, and I overall find the hand raise feature becomes very difficult to manage if you have several things going on at once. On the other hand, if you're fortunate enough to have a teaching assistant or a co-host whose job is to help run the queue, that person can monitor this very effectively. So the hand raise feature can be more useful if there are multiple co-hosts who are able to delegate amongst themselves different tasks during the meeting. And by the way, if you're an attendee and you put your hand up and don't get called on, you do have a couple options. The next best option is to chat to the host. And only if that doesn't get a response and you feel very much entitled and needing to speak, you could unmute yourself and simply interject. However, that may be seen as rude depending on your circumstance and your culture. One thing you can ask by raising your hand or setting up a chat is to be unmuted and to speak. And then the host will be able to unmute you if you can't unmute yourself. The host will be given the option ask to unmute. The host doesn't actually turn on your microphone, and then an alert comes to the participant or attendee who will get the choice to stay muted and to be silent, not heard, or to unmute and speak. In conclusion, the goal is to use the tool best suited for the task. And we first need to define the tasks or objectives or goals that we can accomplish online, and then look at the tools that we have at our disposal. Today we reviewed 4 goals and 10 tools that we can use to effectuate them. And we again begin this by writing an effective agenda that comes from some planning about why we need a meeting in the first place. And the result will be an effective meeting which will inspire your audience to participate because they know they're going to be productive and useful. And for that reason, I recommend ending by recognizing people's accomplishments, and in fact, the accomplishments of the group as a whole. Ludwig Wittgenstein said, "Knowledge is in the end based on accomplishment. And I say motivation and inspiration are too. By finishing the meeting with remarks about how much was done and how much progress was made, the attendees will feel accomplished and positive and look forward to the next opportunity to so contribute. It can be tempting to end the meeting on all the things that were not done, or to think about what we will do next time. And yes, those are important matters to discuss. But if you talk about what has not been done at the exclusion of all the things that were accomplished, it may feel to the attendees that their time was wasted. And remember that you'll have an opportunity to craft a thoughtful agenda, which you can circulate 48 hours or more before the next meeting. So you don't need to conclude the meeting with a discussion of everything that happens at the next one. Rather, you can conclude by a recap of what was accomplished at this one, and that will provide a foundation for people to be on the same page and feeling positive about moving forward. If you have questions or need personalized advice, I'm here to help. I offer one-on-one coaching through IACCM, and you can also email me at seth.oranburg@gmail.com if you have any questions. Again, it was my pleasure to present this information to you, and I hope it helped you in thinking about how to be more effective in hosting and attending meetings online.